a total blow to the Kremlin. The Ukrainian armed forces are receiving deadly hybrids of missiles and aerial bombs. Washington is supplying the Ukrainian armed forces with the weapons of the future. Putin is in a panic. America's superweapons in the hands of Ukrainian defenders. This will change everything. Ukraine is receiving next-generation strike power.
An American greeting for Ukraine's Independence Day. Following the recent statements by Keith Kellogg, it has been announced that American cruise missiles will be sent to Ukraine.
It is an honor for me to present you with this award. Thank you.
According to the Wall Street Journal, the Donald Trump administration approved the sale to Ukraine of more than 3,000 extended-range attack munition air-to-surface missiles.
It should be noted that neither the Pentagon nor the White House has officially confirmed the information about the sale of air-to-surface missiles to Ukraine, which, according to media reports, are supposed to be delivered to the Ukrainian side within the next 6 weeks. Therefore, we can say that this is a so-called controlled information leak. That is, when the Russian Federation is made aware of the White House administration's plans.
A few days earlier, Russian terrorists launched a missile strike on an American company's factory in western Ukraine. Essentially, Putin nullified Trump's claim that the presence of American business in Ukraine is in itself a guarantee of security.
What did you say to Vladimir Putin about yesterday's strike on the American factory in Ukraine?
I told him that I was not happy about it. I'm not happy about anything that's happening in this war.
Sometime later, the President of the United States made an important statement. Donald Trump admitted that Ukraine cannot win the war by only defending itself.
It's very difficult, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking the aggressor country, just as if a great sports team with a fantastic defense were not allowed to play offense. There's no chance of winning. It's the same with Ukraine and Russia. The dishonest and terribly incompetent Joe Biden did not allow Ukraine to strike back, only to defend itself. And what came of it?
According to experts, the supply of long-range air-launched missiles is Trump's logical response to the demonstrated unwillingness of the Russian dictator to negotiate.
This is the so-called Allo Verd, meaning a counterstrike from the United States. Moreover, I do not rule out that, along with the possible supply of strike weapons, permission will also be granted to carry out a retaliatory strike on the territory of the Russian Federation.
The key point regarding the supply of American air-to-surface missiles, which, as reported, have been paid for by Ukraine's European allies, is their large quantity, specifically 3,350 missiles, and their strike range up to 450 kilometers.
450 kilometers covers virtually the entire rear infrastructure of the Russian occupation army, directly on the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Additionally, if permission is granted to use these strike assets on the territory of the Russian Federation, this range covers the entire rear logistics of the Russian army and, accordingly, legitimate military targets within Russian territory. This is significantly, almost by a third, greater than the tactical and technical specifications of the American ATACMS.
The combination of quantity and range of the ERAM missiles means that, unlike the scarce Storm Shadow and ATACMS, these missiles can be used much more frequently, including for precision strikes against fighters, bombers, and launchers of the occupying army.
First and foremost, it appears that air bases will be the primary focus of increased attention from the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Additionally, the launch points, that is, the locations from which UAVs as well as cruise and ballistic missiles are launched on the territory of the Russian Federation, will also be targeted.
Breaking news, Ramzan Kadyrov is preparing his family for his demise. Don is appointing his close relatives to leadership positions. But will such family appointments actually save them? The Kremlin is not idle and is preparing a completely different scenario. Details coming up in the report. The system of power in Chechnya has long been built around the cult of the Kadyrov family. For Ramzan Kadyrov, this is both a strength and a weakness. Everything is subordinated to him personally. But new data shows it's not just about controlling the region. Don is building a true dynasty, securing his influence in case of his death.
I appoint those individuals whom I completely trust.
According to BBC estimates, more than 80 members of the Kadyrov clan already hold key positions in the government. 20 control the security forces, 11 sit in parliament, and the rest are ministers, businessmen, heads of foundations, and sports clubs. And this is no coincidence, it's a carefully constructed system of hereditary power transfer.
People have simply resigned themselves to this fate. They are not completely submissive, I know that. We have a very serious underground movement in Chechnya, but today Chechnya, the situation in Chechnya can be seen as, well, a concentration camp where the entire population is gathered and held hostage. There are those who serve this regime, and we, both on television and in propaganda, see only those who serve this system, the occupation structures. But the general population, who are waiting and biding their time, they are neither seen nor noticed by anyone. People are simply surviving today and trying to make it through this situation.
Kadyrov also strengthened the system through marriage alliances. His children have become related by marriage to at least 15 influential Chechen clans, the Delimkanovs, the Geremayevs, the Vismuradovs, and others. In this way, through weddings and business, he creates a shield for his family, turning Chechnya into his personal principality.
And Kadyrov, with these marriage ties, alliances, is trying to secure the personal support of the most influential Chechen clans, just in case this informal contract with Putin, with the Russian dictator, is ever terminated. We know that for many years Kadyrov had the right to basically do whatever he wanted and remain unpunished, and he actively took advantage of this. Whether it was egregious political assassinations, influencing significant federal politics, widespread corruption, or these extensive harems that the investigative project meticulously reported on. So if Putin does eventually abandon this logic of personal immunity for Kadyrov and his plan, then the Kadyrov family will have to rely on the loyalty of other Chechen clans that are close to Kadyrov's, but still exist separately from him.
The heirs have already been assigned their roles. The eldest, Akhmat, heads the sports and football club, Akhmat. The second, Zelimkhan, runs the fight club and the boxing federation. But according to experts, the main successor is the third son, Adam. His scandalous reputation has only helped him. After beating a prisoner in the Grozny detention center, the teenager was not charged. Instead, he was rewarded. A few weeks later, he became the youngest head of the regional leader's security service. At 17, Adam is already the secretary of the Chechen Security Council. His career path remarkably mirrors that of Ramzan himself. Everything is also mapped out for the women in the family. The eldest daughter, Aishat, went from fashion designer to deputy prime minister and now owns Chechen Mineral Waters, which brings in billions in revenue. Kadizat, Tabarik, and Kutmat, along with their husbands, have also been placed in key positions in government and business. But behind the facade of glamour and ostentatious luxury lies fear. The health of the Don himself has been a concern for several years now. Frequent medical leaves, rumors of a serious diagnosis, and absences from federal events. For the Kremlin, Kadyrov remains a guarantor of stability, but the question of his successor is still unresolved. The law does not allow his sons to take the position of head before the age of 30. This means that Moscow will have to seek a compromise between the interests of the clan and the formal requirements of the law. And while the family prepares to inherit power after Ramzan's departure, behind the scenes Moscow may be preparing a completely different scenario.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Shock! Russia is sliding into a bloody Middle Ages. Putin has legalized torture. Now it is a legal tool of power. The world is horrified. In Russia, torture is no longer a crime. This is the new norm of the Kremlin. Watch all the shocking details right now. Even fewer rights for the people? And why not? Russia has begun the process of withdrawing from the Convention Against Torture or Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment.
We will definitely succeed in the end.
Prime Minister Mishustin has already signed the decree and sent it directly to Putin. But why only now?
I think that's just how things turned out. They decided the time had come. In fact, everyone already knows and understands perfectly well that prisoners are tortured, detainees are tortured, everyone is tortured. Nevertheless, purely formally, this convention was signed and even ratified by Russia's own State Duma.
But here's what's interesting. According to the convention, the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture has the full right to come and inspect prisons, penal colonies, pre-trial detention centers, and so on. But it has been reported that Russia stopped responding to requests for cooperation a long time ago.
Well, look, there was a similar situation with the European Court of Human Rights, right? Everything happens gradually, step by step. So at first, Russia stopped not just stopped complying with the decisions of the European Court, but then eventually left the Council of Europe altogether. Right? So it's the same thing here.
Nevertheless, about 3 years ago, Eva Merkachova prepared an entire report on the topic of torture and even mentioned this convention. But of course, none of the changes she requested were implemented.
I ask you to support the initiative to introduce amendments to the criminal code to add a separate article on torture. Let me remind you that there is the UN Convention Against Torture, which Russia has ratified, and in fact we were obliged to introduce such an article. But so far nothing has happened.
People tell Putin about torture right to his face. Meanwhile, he just lowers his face, as if it doesn't concern him.
She is one of the last members of this presidential council who, well, actually spoke the truth to Putin's face. And of course, he didn't like that. And naturally, he didn't like the conversations about torture either.
But what, at this point, gives the Kremlin a formal way out of the agreement, which in reality hasn't been working for a long time anyway?
This is exactly a demonstration that, guys, as long as you're under our protection, nothing will happen to you. Just do as you're told and everything will be fine. And to fulfill our wishes, you can do whatever you want. If you need to torture, torture. If you need to kill, kill.
And this is far from the first time Russia has withdrawn from international agreements. First, Moscow withdrew from the European Convention on Human Rights, and now it's the turn of the Convention Against Torture. As a result, Russians are being deprived even of formal international protection.
Before, there was at least one had to keep up appearances, right? I mean, you could beat people, but carefully, so there wouldn't be any marks. Torture, but not to the point, so to speak, of damaging internal organs. To put someone on a bottle, but not too deep. But now, these restrictions are becoming fewer and fewer, so for ordinary Russians, things will only get worse.
Russia is moving further and further away from international rules of the game. It seems like the Kremlin is deliberately closing the doors so that no one interferes with building its own special reality.
I would call this back to the Middle Ages. So when the practice of torture is permitted, then, as they often say, a comprehensive arsenal of various tools immediately appears that can be effectively used to carry out that very torture.
Despite everything, on August 26th, Eva Merkacheva even commented on the idea of Russia withdrawing from the convention and called it quite expected, but at the same time noted that Russian laws prohibiting torture will not be repealed. But we understand. For the Kremlin, laws have long meant nothing, neither Russian nor international ones. That's all for now. Watch more hot news from the front in the next episode.